Okay, so we are stepping out into the compound. What was your first impression of this place when you arrived?
I remember opening the front door and then walking immediately through to the back door. I do this in like when I enter art museums, for example. I love getting their kind of like twilight closing discount because I just walk through without ever stopping. Um, and your house felt like a kind of bohemian museum of like dripping with coolness that I didn't know how to take in. So I immediately had to like enter and exit and slowly work my way to understanding the rules,
Of which there aren't many. There's
of
two
which there aren't
rules
many.
here. One is don't let the cat out of the house, and two is pee anywhere but in the pool. That's what I tell people when they first arrive. My question, I remember someone saying, maybe it was on that weekend, that there's two types of neuroscientists, those who have taken psychedelics and those who haven't. I don't know if they said this about neuroscientists or scientists in general, but there was someone who thought that it just so drastically changes your perspective on what it is to be human and the interaction between these substances. And do you have a thought on that? Do you think that they say something significant about the brain?
So there's this thing in like animal conservation called the charismatic megafauna, which is like for some reason people have this. If you look at the list of species that people kind of put on endangered lists and care about, it's the big ones. It's the charismatic ones, like the friendly big, like North African rhino and the elephant and the snow leopard and things like that. But the argument is like, well, if what you care about in terms of extinction or the extinction of a species is, say, genetic diversity, you should care much more about like every species of beetle than these large kind
Let's
of
say
like
here's like,
megafauna.
uh-huh.
And I think there's an analog with the way that people think about consciousness. So, the way that I have this phrase that I'm kind of like working on, which is charismatic mega quale. So we have quale, right? Qualia, which are like the feeling of what it is like to be or to be something. And I feel like in the same way that we prioritize the conservation of these big charismatic kind of like creatures, we prioritize the big charismatic conscious experiences. And psychedelics, I think, maybe tweak or tune a filter in the way that you might on a camera lens, put a new filter on, or a new magnification, say on a microscope or telescope. But they are not even touching. I think that's at the margins of conscious experience. I think consciousness is mostly made of like non-charismatic minor quale, right? Which are like the little beetles, the 30,000 types of beetle. And what I mean by that is that people even if they see kind of like skulls in ivy or whatever as they're wandering around the desert, or the Joshua tree turns into, I don't know, like their father coming out of the ground. Um, it's still the fact that what the brain cares about is movement. What the brain cares about is operating around the world efficiently, and most of that is still being accomplished. So I would argue that, like, yes, many drugs that we have encountered, of which probably we have only seen a infinitesimally small subset. Like once we get into kind of designer chemistry, that shit's gonna explode. Um, but even then, it's really just tweaking the margins. That most of what the brain is doing is still operating fully and efficiently. Your brain is 100% of the time. Every single cell in your brain is 100% of the time working.
Right.
That whole myth of the like 2% or 10% of the brain at a time is completely and utterly absurd. Every cell is working all of the time, always.
Maybe that myth though comes from so my mentor at Berkeley, Professor Dreyfus, Bert Dreyfus, who I made the film Being in the World, about and inspired by. Um, he thought, and kind of inspired by Heidegger, that consciousness itself is overrated as a phenomenon because partly because of what you're saying. Like most of the way we are in the world, being in the world, is kind of pre-consciously. And in fact, when we're most excelling, he argued, we're not conscious of anything. We're just flowing, and we're kind of one with the experience and with So
Yeah.
there's and and consciousness maybe is this almost kind of epiphenomenal byproduct that we shouldn't focus so much attention on. And it seems to me that it has something to do with when we have a choice, right? So we don't, when the basketball players in total flow, there are no choices because there's only one, or the chess player is playing at his maximum capability. The only thing that appears is the right move. So consciousness is not that necessary because there isn't a choice presented. And I read some study that I mentioned yesterday, and I can't remember what it was, but that they figured out that cows only become conscious when danger appears because then they have to decide what they're going to do, right? So do you think there's some relationship between the free will question and the consciousness question?
I think so. The brain has had to remember everything that it has ever experienced. So whoever the owner of the brain is, the body that encapsulates the brain, like a kind of, I think of it like a drop of rain requires a small particle in the middle, like a nucleation center. Usually it's bacteria or like a small piece of grain or dirt or something. But and so then the drop of rain has to form around it. I see the body is like forming around this brain. It's when Heidegger or Dreyfus are talking about these kind of like highly skilled things that seem to like disappear from the person's front consciousness, I think that's a charismatic mega quality. I think what they're saying is it's no longer a thing that feels readily apparent and what it is like to do that thing. I can somehow like supersede the immediate goals and just think about the long-term goal that I want to achieve. And there's a very physical process behind this. It's not mysterious. You learn something over time as you train and learn the kind of statistics of that, coordinating your movements to the goal that you want in any given arbitrary sport or task, whether or not it's chess, Go, or basketball, or language. It gets offloaded into a part of the brain that has kept track of everything that you've ever known. And so even something as simple as, as complex as perception, for example, we are all as highly skilled, if not more skilled, at seeing and at moving our hands than Michael Jordan ever was at basketball, for example. Like every single one of us is